Welcome, guys, to our philosophy online lecture. And in this video, we will be talking about the course philosophy and culture, giving you a background of the meaning of culture and the characteristics of culture. Okay, so culture was derived from the Latin word cultus, which means to cultivate. Now, their own meaning to the word culture was related to the spiritual world, the word of saints, and so on. But in the English sense, what culture actually mean, right? They use it in a sense of cultivation and not in the sense of worship, just like the Latin word imply. So now culture in the English meaning implies a conscious or unconscious molding, cultivation of character, ways of behaving, and life in general, right? So here we see that we have words and terms like political culture, religious culture, social culture. Like in political culture, we are talking about those ways of life we have cultivated in terms of governance, in terms of leadership, and so on. In religious culture, we are talking about those the way of life we have cultivated in worship, in our attitude towards worship. Okay, so now we are going to be considering various definitions on culture, right? uh One of the most popular is that of Edward Tylor, right? Edward Tylor was regarded as one of the first philosophers to give a definition of what culture is. Now, Edward Tylor defined culture as, let me quote him: culture or civilization is that complex whole which includes knowledge, belief, arts, law, morals, custom, and any other capabilities and habits acquired by man as a member of the society. So this implies that culture is an embodiment of every areas of life in individuals and in the society at large, like in terms of morality, in laws, religion, and so on. Okay, now the limitation of this definition is that some anthropologists say that he shouldn't have used the term man to limit culture, right? So he should have used terms such as humans and people. Okay, and also a culture, and also that culture and civilization are two different things, right? Now, when we talk about culture, we are talking about the way of life of certain people. Well, now when we talk about civilization, civilization always have a measurement. Like you can say that the Europeans are more civilized than Africans, right? So now it is different. It connotes a different meaning from what culture actually implies. So Taylor try to imply culture as also civilization was another limitation of his definition. Okay, now let's consider another definition. We have Clifford Getz, right? Clifford Getz defined culture as that which consists of symbols, motivations, mood, and thoughts, right? That is what he defined culture as. But the limitation of this definition is that it only limit passive culture as a mental property, right? That it doesn't translate to our behaviors. Okay, so when you say something has to do with motivation, moods, and thoughts, it limits the uh, level of culture to only mental uh, properties, right? So, and culture on its own, as we know, has so much to do with behavior, right? So now that is Clifford definition. Let's consider another definition. Theophilus Okere was another philosopher who gave a comprehensive definition of culture. His definition is that culture is the way of life of a people, their traditional behavior in a broad sense, including their ideas, arts, and artifacts. It is the social heritage which individual acquires from his group. It denotes an historical transmitted pattern of meaning embodied in symbols by a system of inherited conception expressed in symbolic forms by means of which men communicate, perpetuate, and develop their knowledge about and attitude towards life. Now, this definition is long, but what this definition is driving at is that uh, culture, as its definition suggests, is a social heritage because it involves human activities, right? And these human activities are through our social nature genetically transmitted among ourselves, okay? So, from its definition, we could also note that each social group has its own culture that distinguish them from other societies. Okay, now his own limitation is that just like Tyler, he also use the term man and men, right, as a general reference for humans. Okay, now, but one thing that is evident in his definition and that of Taylor is that culture has to do with behavior and ideas, not like Clifford, who uh, called it ideas only, right? Okay, so now let us also give another definition of culture. Now, this is contained in the cultural policy for Nigeria, and the definition states that the totality of the way of life evolved by people in their attempts to meet the challenges of living in their environment, which gives order and meaning to their social, political, economic, aesthetic, and religious norms and mode of organization, thus distinguishing a people from their neighbors is what we can refer to as culture. Okay, so now one important point to note from this definition is that culture is a means of distinguishing people from their neighbors. Okay, and it has to do with their social, political, economic, aesthetic, that is beauty and ethics, right, and religious norms. Okay, so those are the definitions I would love us to consider in this study. Okay, now, uh, having said that, one of the most important feature of culture is that it includes our habits, our music, dance, food, clothing, and so on, and they are deeply rooted in our thoughts and our practices. Okay, now let us consider the characteristics of culture. What are the features of culture? Okay, so the first characteristic of culture is that culture is different from nature, right? We shouldn't confuse culture and nature. Nature are those things that are given to us, that are those things that we met, right? But culture, on the other hand, are what we created for ourselves, right? Now, there are when it comes to nature, there are things that we we can't survive without them, and they are popular across all culture, right, all society, and some of these things are eating, sleeping, respirating, giving birth, and so on, right? All these things are common across every society, so we shouldn't confuse them as culture, right? Now, it is now each society that now determines the culture and the way at which they approach everything that nature gives to them. Okay, now, for example, it's compulsory for us to eat, right, but the kinds of food we would love to eat, right, and what the kind of food that we forbid, all those ones are our culture, right? They are different from the nature that demand that we must eat. Okay, now, for example, the Yoruba culture hold amala in high regard, the Igbo hold akpu in high regard, their soup, and so on. Shey you get? So culture is different from nature, right? Now it is not culture that gave us it's not nature that gave us respect. It is we that built the idea of respect. So that those are some of the points to note, that nature is different from culture and vice versa. Okay, so the second point is of the characteristics of culture is that culture is learned. Now culture is learned through, according to Miller, culture is learned through a process of enculturation, and enculturation is a process of learning that starts at birth, in which the individual learn the culture that is obtainable in his or her society. Now this process could take different forms, such as being in dance group, age grade, association, and so on. Enculturation can also be a conscious and unconscious activity, right? There are some things that we learn by observation. There are things that just become part of us because that is what we grow into. Okay, so that is the second feature of culture. The third one is that culture is adaptive, and this point to the fact that people are able to adjust to uh, different changes, right, in order to ensure their survival. So their culture could change, right, and they can be able to adapt to it. Okay, so culture is not something that is stagnant, right? Now for example, before, you in the primitive society, man do farm and hunt to survive. Now we can uh, do business online, right, to survive. So culture is something that people can adapt to. Okay, now the fourth one is that culture is integrated, and this express the idea that uh, result from our conception of what culture is, right, as a complex whole, right, like just like Tyler put it, right. So every culture is linked into each other, right, and the importance of this is that a culture cannot be properly understood when some of these aspects, which are linked together or in the whole, right, are neglected. Okay, so now uh, for example, if you want to talk about morality, you can't talk about morality without talking about law. Okay, shey you get? So all of them are linked together. So this is another feature of culture. The last one is that culture is dynamic, and this point emphasize the possibility of culture to change, right. Now okay, so now something that has been a norm that is accepted in a society, tomorrow that thing could be something that is forbidden. So culture is prone to change, right. For example, long ago there used to be killing of twins in a particular tribe in Nigeria, but now it is now forbidden. So culture is a dynamic something, right. So that is that on the various characteristics of culture. Thank you so much for listening. Please kindly subscribe and turn on post notification. God bless you.